Pinakayun mina Enya pilkare Namba ularungan Muror ngawo Rongiri pinakayun Ya barawalayo Moy moy nga kalaniniyo Yanaba guwalil nga Yanaba waradiga Yanaba yumenga Yaorman ngatinana Niango na lanying no dungo na yo Ya bapa kampa junga junga Miling tura palma Mayang araga Yang di mana Merekap miri manda Numanyang kaya tangan na Roy pumilindi Yang di mana Merekap miri manda Numanyang atiyan Milmor burarapo Yanaba guwalil nga Yanaba waradiga Yanaba yumenga Thank you.
Great. Great.
Welcome everyone to the event. I'm going to pass on to Robin, who will introduce Auntie Ali, who will be doing our welcome to country.
Thank you, Mansi. And thank you to the whole team, all the organisers and all the panellists who've been part of putting this program together. A very big congratulations to Raising Peace, who organised 4 panels last year with 650 people. And so we're following in the same footsteps with this panel here today, and it's a great honour to be here with Auntie Ali and another colleague, here's Sue, in this panel today. We're on Bidjigal land, Auntie Ali's land, as she's living today. But in fact, Auntie Ali is a long-term elder from the Biripi Nation up on the far north coast in Taree. And many of us have got to know Auntie Ali over the last 30 or 40 years. So it's a great honour to be able to introduce Auntie Ali. I guess we've got to know Auntie Ali primarily through the work that she's done with the Women's Reconciliation Network, with Reconciliation New South Wales, and all the wonderful other things that she's involved in and has been involved in. She's a great storyteller. She's very cheeky, as most of you will know, and she prides herself on that. She's laughing at the moment. She's a singer. She sings the most beautiful songs. She's an artist and a storyteller. And I think that, yes, it's just wonderful that Auntie Ali, our auntie, our queen, as it were, in this part of the world, can open this particular gathering of Raising the Peace. So a very warm welcome, Auntie Ali, and a warm welcome to everybody to this wonderful Raising the Peace event. Welcome, Auntie Ali.
Thank you so much, Robin. And thank you for having me here today. And to something that I do, I love doing. I've done it for years. It's my finest journey that I've had since I started doing it. It was welcome and acknowledgements to the country. And it's always an honor for me. Every time I used to go into wherever I'm going to say acknowledgement to country, I always been held by the hand, by the elbow if I was getting out of the transport before I went into where I was going to do welcome to country. And I knew that was the male spirit held my elbow and helped me in to where I was supposed to go. Other times it wasn't held, I wasn't held by the elbow. I had my hair pushed back and brushed back, and I knew that was the female spirit of that homeland that guided me into where I was to do the acknowledgement to country. So I feel the spirits, and that's one thing that I love doing. Taken to your places with the spirits of the homeland. So I'll start now with my words. I would like to acknowledge the Aurora peoples of the Gadigal homeland, of the first traditional custodians of this land we are gathered on today. And whichever land that you are on at this moment in this program, the land was taken from them without permission or consent, and sadly affected their cultural lifestyle. But thank the big spirit by Ami. Thank him that they couldn't break or destroy their spirits, their spirituality. That's the main thing. That's the important thing that they can never take from us. So they couldn't break destroy their spirits. And I would like to also gratefully pay my respect to the elders, both past and present, I would like also to extend this same respect to my Aboriginal and my Torres Strait Islander and non-Aboriginal people who are present here too. And on behalf of my custodians people, I will say with a pride, welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you.
And thank you, Auntie Ellie, for gracing us with your presence and your acknowledgement of country. We're looking forward to hearing from you later on in the panel. My name is Peter Griffin, and I wish to acknowledge that I am on the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. It's my happy duty to welcome you to this series of conversations over 5 days in the Raising Peace Festival of Peace in 2022. Raising Peace Network is an alliance of more than 30 organisations, and together we're working to share ideas, knowledge, inspiration for a peaceful world. Our festival is held each year in the lead up to the United Nations Day of Peace on the 21st of September. All past Raising Peace events are recorded on the website raisingpeace.org.au, and current sessions will be placed on the website in the next few weeks. On behalf of everyone at Raising Peace, I hope that today's conversation enriches your own journey to peace, and we look forward to seeing you at later sessions in the festival. And for a bit of housekeeping, if you're not already muted, we ask you to do so now. And during the conversation, you can place questions for the speakers in the chat and put up resources you might like to share. Please refrain from public debate in the chat. This session, called Reaching Out to Australia, follows as a direct consequence of the 2021 yarning entitled Walking Together. In that webinar and since, our minds have been turned not only to the opportunity for First Nations people, but also to the 97% of Australians who have the power to welcome First Nations people to their place at the table in decisions made about them. First Nations and their descendants seek to be heard. The road to progress is long and never ending. In the panel today, we have 4 First Nations leaders and 1 non-Indigenous speaker who together will discuss this enterprise and how First Nations people see it, and what it means for all of us to step up. Our speakers and our audience come from all over Australia. Our moderator is Des Rogers, whom I would like to introduce by saying that Des is a respected Southern Arrernte Aboriginal man from the Purdam clan in Central Australia, and he resided in his hometown of Alice Springs for many years, and he now lives in Brisbane. Des's accomplishments range from founding an Aboriginal business incubator, mentoring youth in Alice Springs in response to culturally appropriate skills development, and developing economic opportunities to suit the needs of the community. For over 15 years, Des has continued to be mentor to many people. Des is a highly skilled executive leader with extensive board memberships in the not-for-profit and public sectors. He has provided strategic direction, demonstrated operations and facility management, community engagement, financial management, and has a proven track record in driving organisational performance improvement and reform in line with corporate governance and government requirements. I invite Des now to introduce the panel.
Yeah, thanks very much for those kind words, Peter. I've only just came to be a part of this. I was first of all invited, a week or so ago to be on the panel. Then all of a sudden, I've become the moderator. So I'm very humbled, but very pleased to be here. So I'd just like to introduce the panel members. Just trying to get rid of that thing off the screen. I'd first of all like to talk about a little bit about Auntie Ali Golding, who's a grassroots Indigenous leader recognised as a valued elder who demonstrates compassion, humility and justice. A proud Burrup woman, Auntie Ali grew up on the Tari Mission in New South Wales. Auntie Ali was the 2010 Female Elder of the Year. In the 1980s, she became one of the first Aboriginal education assistants at Cleveland High School here in Queensland. And in 2004, she graduated from Nungali College in Darwin with a diploma in theology. Auntie Ali has made an important contribution to many national and international forums, including the World Spirit Healing Conference in Canada, International Women's Day events in Parliament, the Women's Reconciliation Network, the New South Wales Reconciliation Council, and ANTAR. Auntie Ali has convened with many dignitaries, including Nelson Mandela, Queen Elizabeth II, and Gough Whitlam, just to name a few. In all of these, she shares so generously. Auntie Ali Golding reminds us how to stay connected and stay strong. I'd like to introduce Pastor Uncle Ray Menicon, who is an executive member of the Indigenous Peoples Organisation, director of the Bungie Consultancies, and a descendant of the Cubby Cubby Nation and a Gurung Gurung Nation of Southeast Queensland. Ray is also a descendant of the South Seas Island people with a deep abiding connection to the people of Ambrym Island. Pastor Ray has an MBA, has a BA, in theology from Murdoch University in Western Australia. Go to the non-Indigenous person who's on the panel, who's very qualified. Margaret Hepworth is the Executive Officer of Initiatives of Change Australia. Margaret has a background of 30 years in education, a thought leader and a founder of the Peace Education Initiative, the Gandhi Experiment. Margaret has a strong sense of social equality with people-centred leadership qualities. She is the recipient of the Sir John Monash Award for Inspirational Women's Leadership in 2016, the IABC Community Achievement Excellence Award in 2019, and the Gloria de Souza International Excellence Award, Best Educator in 2020. The other important person on the panel today is Mr. Jeff Scott, who's a Wiradjuri man from Narromine in New South Wales with more than 30 years of experience working in Aboriginal affairs. Jeff's previous positions included CEO of the Darkagin Local Aboriginal Land Council, CEO of the National Congress of Australia First Peoples, CEO of the New South Wales Aboriginal Land Council, Director General New South Wales Department of Aboriginal Affairs, and the Deputy CEO of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Commission. Jeff was the Executive Officer of the Referendum Council and was a key leader throughout the Uluru Dialogue process. All of these panel members have extensive CVs. If I had to reduce it down to the words that I've just spoken, if I had to read them all out, it'd take an hour. It doesn't reflect their age by any chance, but it certainly reflects their capabilities and qualifications, which are outstanding. So as I said, I'm quite humbled to be here. The only rule today, so to speak, is in regards to respect. Hopefully everyone respects everyone else and gives the people the chance to talk. So the context for today's Q&A is obviously around the Uluru Statement from the Heart and the voice. My observation is that there's still a lot of confusion and lack of knowledge around these two aspects, and it's being amplified by concurrently truth-telling, sovereignty, what body organisation or who's going to represent the grassroots people across the nation. Protocol dictates that I need to first of all go to Auntie Ali, and then I'm going to go to Uncle Ray. And the simple question is, Auntie Ali, is why is the voice to Parliament important to us as First Nations people?
Why is that a bit louder?
Why is the voice of Parliament important to us as First Nations people?
I was here. Yeah. Why is the voice to Parliament so important to Aboriginal people? that voice, we've been waiting for this voice to be heard for a long, long, long time. It's a very long time. And that's why it's so very important. And it's people like the Raising Peace, people getting together and wanting people to ask that same question. Why is the voice, so important? It's so important to the Aboriginal people, to Parliament. I always thought to myself about waiting so long to be heard, and they've been deaf too long. And I think they're in their little locked up offices. And I wonder to myself, are the papers about us Aboriginal people in Parliament, as our papers are clean, or have they got dust all over them? Because they didn't no interest in knowing what we need and to listen to our voices, and for us to let them know what we need for our people in this country. So it's very important for them to listen. We can just voice it. That's all we can do, is just ask, write letters. I don't think that we should be like in the 60s. Our Aboriginal people were heard in a different way with their voices. When I think of all the Redfern people that got together, demonstrated on the streets to be heard, went over to Canberra. There they walked on the lawns of the old Parliament House, trying to have their voices be heard there. And this was back in the 60s. So a lot of things, it's really stresses elders out today, like myself, at this age, and knowing how long we waited for to hear our voices heard in Parliament, and for them to do something about what our voices are speaking about. Our needs. It's time. We need that support now from Parliament. We need it now. We want to be heard. Listen to us. When I think about what happened from the 60s up till when they started demonstrating sea of hands, walking across the bridge, reconciliation there, all those things. It was very, very active in those days. We were speaking out. We were using a lot of energy. But what happened to that energy? So our people need to grab that energy back again. Rise up with that same energy of the 60s. We're in 2022 now. We got to rise up that same energy. Let us be heard. Put our voices forward now. The same as the 60s. And we can see where we go from there. To me, the 60 voices are important for me today, 2022, to be heard again and bring that energy back again. Protest, walk out there, let them hear him. And if the big spirit allows us, let him, with this new Parliament leader now, the new Prime Minister now, may Miami will touch him, his ears and his spirit and his heart. and we may have a bit of luck, and we may have something done now in this year now with this new leader. And that's what I'm hoping for and praying for, that this will be the voices now of us coming forward, having the Spirit backing us and touching the soul of the Prime Minister now. That's what I think as an elder. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Auntie Ali. Hopefully, Uncle Ray, you need to unmute yourself if you're muted. You probably are. We don't need to see your face, but we're happy to see it, of course. So I'm going to pose the same question to you, Uncle Ray. Why is the voice to Parliament so important to us as First Nations people?
Look, thanks, mate. Look, the reasons why I'm not being seen is because I'm in a very difficult connection place here. I'm actually on my mother's country here, up here in Queensland, Gureen country.
Did you
So-
hear him?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Ray.
Oh, good. And I'll just share, just let you have a bit of a look.
No,
Hi, everyone.
exactly the same.
Now I'll close off because I look ugly. Look, this particular voice, we need to realize that we've never lost our voice. And it's 60,000 years old. And even before the 67 referendum, we had a voice. It's always been here. It's never gone anywhere. It's been in this land. And even if this voice gets through, the voice will still be here. It's never going away. And it will never be quelled, nor will it be diminished by. Sorry about that. Can you take this away? Yeah, that's the first thing. Is that this voice has all.
You might have won the
Always
lotto.
been here.
Uncle Ray.
Pardon,
You might have won the lotto.
mate? I know who it is.
Oh, okay. You haven't won the lotto.
Yeah, I haven't won the lotto. Got into trouble more. But look, that's the first thing I wanted to say. And in terms of this voice here, it is a bit of a challenge. It's a David and Goliath situation for us because the ratio is 97 to 3, I should say, because we're only 3% of the population. So we're now depending upon 97% of the population to say yes in a yes vote. So that's huge, big odds against us. And we don't, I'm not going to put my hope in that 97%, because I know deep in my heart, the voice will never leave this country, never leave it for anyone. It'll always be here. So if we were to go down this track, I mean, there's a couple of good guidelines that we've already have in place that have given us some way of looking at this through, not just through our own personal lives, but also through national lives. I mean, we have the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and in that declaration there is some very, very important parts of that declaration that are really significant, and I know that people will take those particular declarations to heart. I mean, if you look at, for example, was it Articles 18 and 20, 18 to 20, there's that free, prior and informed consent before adopting and implementing any legislative or administrative measures that will affect us. And we do have the right also in Article 20 there to maintain and develop our own political, economic and social systems or institutions to be secure for the enjoyment of our own subsistence and development. So these particular documents have been developed by Indigenous peoples, for Indigenous peoples, with Indigenous peoples, and enshrined there within the United Nations. And our government signed off on the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples back in 2007 or 8, but hasn't been used. I know they're aspirational documents, we know that, but at least there are good guidelines as to how we would look at this particular issue of the Statement of the Heart. And so if we take those principles from the Declaration and from those articles in the Declaration, including Article 3, which talks about self-determination, then, and take into consideration the hard work that's already been achieved by lots of our people here. We've got, two major documents that have been developed to look at this particular issue here. And so we've got very good people who have trying to help us to work through these particular processes so that we know what we're talking about when we get to this place of recognition. If also, most of the times our voices have been heard through the legal processes. I mean, if you look at the Mabo decision, made one of the most important declarations in it when it declared that our people, particularly the Miriam people, anyways, have the right to possession. Oh, gee whiz! My brain just went flat there, but it did declare and show the basis of the importance of sovereignty. And if you read the Keating speech after the declaration, you'll see that he had a huge big challenge in front of him because of that declaration. It was a declaration of our sovereignty. And the third thing too, or should I say, I'll finish with this last one here. If we look to this little island just east of us called New Zealand, or Aotearoa, so they already instituted a voice to Parliament back in 1867. And in that particular, they call they set up the Maori Representation Act in 1867. And in that particular case, they set up 4 seats for the voice to be heard in Parliament, for the Maori voice. And then when I look back at our history, there was a call way back in from the 1930s onwards by people like William Cooper, who said that this government should look at that representational act and start to implement the voice. That similar kind of arrangement here with our particular government. I mean, he even wrote to the Crown and the King and all of these kind of things to try to get that voice heard. And so even though it might have been suppressed under the Aboriginal Protection Acts or under Terra Nullius, we can see that the voice has never stopped to exist in this country. It will never cease to exist. It will never be quenched. It will never be diminished. And if we could look at perhaps, I saw where Linda went across to Aotearoa just after she got elected as the Minister for Indigenous Affairs. And I think she was going to look at this Representational Act of 1867 and see how that could be worked here in this country here so that we do have some kind of representation. So we've got a long way to go. We're looking at this voice from a whole different range of ways, through the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, to the 2 documents that have already been developed and designed, the co-design programs, that the documents that have been designed. We have the Statement from the Heart. We have the Maori Representation Act, And we also have the basis of this going forward in a few of the major important decisions that have been made through litigation. And that one was the Mabo decision. And the other one was the decision that was made in Love and Trump versus the Commonwealth in terms of our identity and our citizenship in this country here. So those particular acts have really spelled out very clearly who we are in this country. And so a voice, I'm not quite sure what it will achieve, but I would really hope that we can say yes to the voice. I think a no would be putting us back again behind, and so I'd like to see it advance so that we can start to develop something that is very important for not just for our people, but we do know around the world people are looking at this country here about that. But let's remember that my voice will never be quenched by anything. It has never been quenched. It has never been diminished. We will always speak out. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Uncle Ray. What I'd like to do now is ask the only non-Indigenous person on the panel, who happens to be a lady by the name of Margaret Hepworth. So Margaret, can I ask you the same question? Why is the voice of Parliament so important to us as First Nations people, but from your perspective?
Thank you, Des. Thank you. Wominjeka, everybody. I'm speaking from the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and I would like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. And I do want to say, as the only non-Indigenous person on the panel, I'm deeply humbled and honoured to be part of a panel along with Auntie Ali and Uncle Ray and Jeff and Des. It's quite extraordinary. So why, as a non-Indigenous person, do I support the call? It is a call for a First Nations voice to be enshrined in the Constitution. And what do I see as potentially the highly successful outcomes of a voice enshrined? And why am I on this panel as a non-Indigenous person? So just a touch of a background about me. I am the Executive Officer of Initiatives of Change Australia, and Initiatives of Change has been walking alongside First Nations peoples for decades. And some of these, Auntie Ali, are the voices you were referring to back in the 1960s, those strong activists, such as Auntie Marge Tucker and Uncle Reg Blow. And then more recently, I became the executive officer at the beginning of last year. We've been walking very strongly, stridently, I think, alongside Thomas Mayer, who is one of the signatories to the Uluru Statement from the Heart, Uncle Shane Charles, who's the co-chair of Reconciliation Victoria, who lives at our centre and is guiding us in the most extraordinary way, and Uncle Glenn Lockery and others, many others, who are working with us in workshops and programs. And so it's through their lens, I think, that IFC Australia and people coming to these workshops are learning and understanding and opening their hearts and opening their ears and beginning to use their own voice in support for a better future for Australia. For myself personally, I've taught what they've called Indigenous studies for 30 years. And this has been so fascinating. If you think 30 years ago, what was being taught in our classrooms, and then over time, I've seen the emergence. Even 20 years ago was when we began talking about an invasion of Australia, not a settlement of Australia. We now talk about the frontier wars. We've now learned about a civil rights movement in Australia. We've had an apology from a Prime Minister, and still this isn't enough. It's nowhere near where we actually need to be today. And so I think I would encourage every single one of us, we've heard about the 97%, every single one of us to familiarize ourselves with the Uluru Statement from the Heart. It is a stunning document, and it's a call to a journey to find our hearts and the hearts of this country. It's a deeply spiritual document, and Auntie Ali spoke about this, you know, that the spirituality has not been broken. It's there and it's strong and it's powerful. And we all need to be listening to this. So the Uluru Statement, it's both personal and collective, it's spiritual and yet also pragmatic. And it's also political and strategic. And it's an invitation for all of us to walk together to find a pathway to justice and healing for a better future. So it's through the Uluru Statement that the call for a First Nations voice to be enshrined in the Constitution and for a Makarrata Commission to be established has been made. So we've been listening carefully, as I said, to people like Uncle Glenn Lockery. They've been unpacking this for us, and Uncle Shane Charles and others. And Uncle Glenn, he tells us, when you look at the voice, treaty, truth, Makarrata, in the center, it's all about justice. And it's all about people and healing trauma and strengthening custodial relationships. It's about finally finding autonomy for First Nations people. To enshrine this in the Constitution is to allow powerful decision-making, and for First Nations people to speak for themselves, to find that justice for themselves, and to guide the government in decision-making as we move forward. It's also about holding the government to account. And we all know about that. So I won't say too much more. I will just say, as a non-Indigenous person, you've heard this phrase from several people now, the 97% and the 3%. This is crucial in anyone on this call who's non-Indigenous. This is crucial, right? To understand that only 250 years ago, that 3% was 100% of the population of this country was First Nations peoples. Only 250 years ago. Given that my grandmother was born in 1901, it's really only a few grandmothers back, right, to that time. And so in a very short space of time, I'll just say quite honestly, the power has shifted. And so we need to be the people also speaking up. We need to also use our voice to support. A referendum, you've got to understand this, a referendum must be passed by a double majority. 3% of the population can't actually carry the referendum. It has to come from all of us. So I'll leave it there, Des, but yeah, let's continue the journey. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Margaret. I mean, it's quite obvious you asked the question, why am I a non-Indigenous person on this panel? And you've answered that. You've answered your own question by what you've said in a number of occasions there. So thank you very much, Margaret. I'm now going to ask Scott West. Jeff Scott, must be getting late in the day, Jeff Scott, to speak, who's been intimately engaged with the Uluru Statement and the Voice from the Heart for quite a number of years and still is. So if anyone on the panel can speak strongly and articulately and from an informed point of view, it's certainly Jeff. So I'm going to hand over to you, Jeff.
Thank you, Des. I'd like to first just acknowledge where I am today. I'm on Wiradjuri country. I'm home. It's my country. I want to acknowledge and pay my respects to my ancestors, my elders, and my people, both for my very existence and my spirit and their support today. Acknowledge them. The Uluru Statement. I think it's the most significant statement that's been made in the last 100 years, in my point of view. It's finally a point where there's a process undertaken which acknowledged that we didn't have a voice. There were many issues raised. This has been a long history of trying to get a better outcome for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people around the country. And this came up in the Referendum Council back in 2015, or prior to that when it was established. We had 5 proposals on the table, and then we took those proposals around to Aboriginal people around and Torres Strait Islander people around the country and asked them what they thought. And we had very much a substantive discussion, which is actually going through providing lawyers in the room whose job was not to speak unless they're allowed, not to speak unless they're asked a question. But it was there to facilitate and to a real much process of opening up what was at the very cause and the very root of these discussions. And after all those discussions, and there was 12 regional dialogues around the country, I can go through details if those people wish to. And then we held a national convention at Uluru in 2017. And we were a little surprised at what the outcome was in the end, but it was driven by the people that were there. Changing 5126 would do nothing. Putting a non-discrimination clause in the Constitution would do nothing. They would have a special measure and still do an intervention. Putting in place changing Section 25 would do nothing, and that was their view. What was there, and I'll take the point from Uncle Ray, and I wish to acknowledge Uncle Ray and Auntie Ali, and their views here were, we've always had a voice, but we're not listened to. So how do we get that voice listened to? And that was the point. And many people's lament of those meetings was getting that point, and that's what came out of the consultations themselves. We've had many forms of voice over many years, but every time the government thought it was okay, they would abolish it. And the last one is when Labor and Liberal combined, and they had a bipartisan moment. And John Howard and the Labor opposition leader at the time, which we don't even mention his name, combined and decided they would execute the last version of the voice. And since we haven't had an effective one, we haven't had a lobby. But what came out of the conference at Uluru, and it's a very strong conference about it, was we want a voice. And it's a voice that's enshrined in the Constitution that can't be removed, that will provide us with certainty and a real say in this country and acknowledgement. One, that we exist and we're recognised as having the proper place in this country. And 2, that we will have a voice. And that voice must be listened to. That's why the wording at the moment is a major discussion that's going on around the country between the lawyers about, well, what makes this effective? I mean, a voice without an effective provision which makes the government listen, they don't have to act on it. We can never usurp the power of government. That's if anyone who thinks we can do that, then we have a problem. Because I don't think the Australian people are going to actually look at creating a body which can override their own parliament. I think that's a bit far-fetched and we won't go there. But the point is here, we had an effective voice and effective lobby, we could actually do it. And the point there was that when we started the voice journey, it was a point that we had to believe it was possible. I mean, structural reform and effective reform is not easy. You must believe. Many people didn't believe we'd win the election. Many people didn't believe we'd have a referendum. We have them. Now, a few months ago, we elected a leader in the Lodge, the first time we've had a leader in the Lodge for many, many years. And that leader on his victory speech at the opening of Parliament and the Garma Festival reiterated his absolute commitment to actually putting the referendum through. But there are some details working through, I'll go through that. But the statement from the heart was an appeal to the Australian people, not to the Parliament. And that's the effective difference. And a constitutional question, a constitutional decision, and a positive one, is the decision of the Australian people that the Parliament cannot overturn. We can't be subject to the machinations of the government of the day. We owe it to our next generation of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children not to go through this again. Anyone who believes that spending $30 billion a year on Aboriginal issues and having, the lack of any demonstrated outcome, I don't think that very fact is an indictment on us all. We can't let it continue. And part of the voice argument here is to do that. I have some slides I can show you about how we do that. That's effectively why I think we need a voice. We need a voice that's entrenched in the Constitution, that must have certainty and must have the power to be listened to and the compulsion to be listened to. Our challenge on this process, should we get through the Constitution, not when we get through the Constitution, must believe, is that we design the voice and a voice that is capable of evolving, that's nimble enough to respond to the different challenges that come to us in the future and to address the concerns around the country, and to become a lobby for the voices, well, the voice of the voiceless. There are many people out whose voices aren't heard. We have many commentators we hear every day. I get bored by that. We have many measures and proposals in place which just frankly aren't working. So I think having this is the most practical and the most effective measure we can take. Now, the Uluru Statement is the most debated research document I've seen for decades, many, many decades. And I think people see the power and the potential that's there. And we have many naysayers, we have many people debating it, and that's okay. Everyone is entitled to an opinion. We're a democracy. Everyone has an opinion. I just hope it's an informed one. That's my hope, desire. Just going back to it, we've had many voices, the NAC, the NACC, we had ATSIC, we had the National Congress, and now the latest version we're trying to push now is the voice. And the Prime Minister has committed himself to a referendum. We'll work through the detail of that. There are many places who think the voice is too powerful. There are many who think the voice is too weak. There are many who want all the detail. What we don't want to do now is usurp the role of Parliament. The role of Parliament here should, when the referendum is passed, is to actually develop legislation and the details of the voice. Those who want to actually say the Parliament should be supreme and shouldn't be challenged, well, they actually want the media to develop the voice to usurp the role of Parliament. So I don't know, they're just not supportive. They'll find any reason not to. But that's my view of the voice itself. There's a few measures here. I think we said we're going to do some. We could do some slides, but I won't do that, and I'll just go back to look at what I've got. But I think the point here is about. There's one document is about. This is about first principles. I think there will be a voice, and that's because there should be one. It will provide advice to Parliament because it's as a matter of right and best practice. The Parliament will have the power over its makeup and powers because that's how our constitutional system works. If we aren't happy with the voice, we can organise to change it. We get it to make it work. There are no easy answers here, but the voice is a mechanism for real and lasting change. And the voice will be a permanent authoritative institution to negotiate the relationship between Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australia. And finally, after 233 years, we'll be taking the substantive step forward, real reconciliation, where First Nations will be recognised and respected, and decisions will no longer be made without them. The treaty can't guarantee that. Truth telling can't guarantee that. But a voice can. What a voice can always do is ensure that we have processes in the future where treaty and truth telling are done properly. They are resourced properly. There's an oversight for them. Treaties in other countries we observe in their breach with no one to breach them. We have many, many truth-telling avenues going on now. We had the Royal Commission. We had the Bring Them Home report. We've had the Royal Commission into the juvenile detention in the territory. We had them every day. The NDIS, the bushfires, the banks. But no one is there to give effect to those recommendations and to drive them. And that's what a voice's job is to not let the government off the hook, to evaluate the $30 billion worth of programs and to make sure they're effective, that meets the needs of our people. This will be our, well, in my generation, the last chance we'll have, and we can't let it drift. The polls are now hitting it at 75% support. And that is phenomenal. We've held it up for the last 5 years, despite the fact that the Prime Minister at the time said no. As soon as he said no, we turned around and said, well, no, that's not good enough. We're going to keep fighting. And we have for the last 5 years. Now we've got a PM who said yes. We're on the road. And again, that was an appeal to the head and the heart. And I'll make the point. The sequencing is important, having the voice first. And someone said to me yesterday at a forum I was doing there, what is the voice actually? How come we talked about recognise and now we're talking about voice? I said, well, you can be recognised, but it has no effect. It's symbolism. You have to be recognised with the real power to actually do something about it and take a rightful place in the country. And that's what I believe the voice will do. I think it's probably enough for me. I have many other points I'd like to make, but I'd like to hear questions. It's again, these questions, these forms are vitally important to draw out the many questions that people have and respond to them. You'll notice that campaign we've been running for the last 5 years, the ads will start running out. but we're waiting for the government at the moment. We want to run ahead of the government. They've been given the brief by the Prime Minister to get out and formalise this process and get it running quickly in the first term of the Parliament. That's a phenomenal undertaking. And I can just again, we have a leader in the lodge. Let's not waste that opportunity. It may not come again. We move from a country based on fear and hate to a country based on hope and vision overnight. The bad old days were 3 months ago. Let's look to the future. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jeff. So I'll just take an opportunity to speak a little bit as well. So as people know, I'm from Alice Springs. I was born in Alice Springs. I was virtually the last chair of the regional council in Alice Springs. When Howard and Brough made the announcement that they were going to abolish ATSIC, one of the statements they made was the government could deliver better programs, better services to Aboriginal people and communities. So I resigned my little protest and I went home to a place called Wallace Rockall, 120 k's west of Alice Springs. And I was there for 2 years. And I can tell you, nothing changed. It actually got worse. And then a year after those 2 years, in 2007, Brough and his cohorts introduced the Northern Territory Emergency Response, which became commonly known as the intervention. And I was on community at the time. I saw the women and children, heading to the hills. I saw the army come into town and it was just appalling. And one of the comments the Brough and that made was they were really concerned about the pedophile rings that were operating in men's bush camps. There was a number of investigations and there was no evidence to back that up. But unfortunately, what that did is it tarnished all black men in Australia as pedophiles, as drunks, as lazy, as wife bashers, a whole bunch of stuff. So as Jeff said, or finished off by saying, this is our greatest hope. I've just retired for the second time, which I don't know whether it's going to last very long, but it's actually given me incentive to still keep a part of this debate. And going back to the 97% and 3%, we need you non-Indigenous people to vote for the referendum for First Nations. And then we can all heal together as a nation, not just us blackfellas. We always, in my view, put out the hand of cooperation and participation, but it's constantly slapped away. And the government and successive governments have demonstrated that they can just pull the rug out from any organisation that they funded. And that's what they did with ATSIC, in my view. So this is the greatest opportunity for us. Us blackfellas, we work in 3-year cycles, the election cycles. So I've got great hope and great faith. And, there's 70 odd people that are on this call here, which a majority are non-Indigenous, I know. Hopefully you'll show a bit of compassion because we can do this together. This is not just about blackfellas. We can do this together and tell the truth about the colonisation of this country. So I'm very excited and, I celebrate every morning when I wake up because I've actually woken up. So it's great. So I'm going to be around for a few more years, hopefully, touch wood. But I think now what I might do is I might hand back to Mancy because I know there's been a number of comments in the chat and I think Robin's going to ask some of those questions. Is that okay, Mancy?
Yeah, absolutely. There have been a number of questions. Robin, do you have them with you?
You're on mute, Robin. I always wanted to say that. You're still on mute. Yes.
Not yet, Robin.
Oh, I didn't realise we were on mute. Sorry. Yeah, I was just saying thank you, Mancy, thank you, Des, and thank you to all the panellists. Just wonderful. We learn something every time we hear you all speaking. Yes, Mancy's been sending the questions through to Sue's phone here. And I'm just starting with the first one from Michelle Smith. She's asking, is reconciliation an endless process? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Right. Is reconciliation an endless process, or can we imagine a reconciled Australia, and what would that look like? And the second part of Michelle's question is, do we need to reinstate an organisation like ATSIC?
I'm just throwing it open to the panel members. Jeff, would you like to?
I can never start the one really. I think reconciliation has been an effective process, and it's actually brought people together on many levels. And it shows us, especially at the local community level, there are so many groups out there have committed themselves and their lives to supporting these issues. We talked to many of those groups. There's many here in Sydney. Robin's Head's one up to speak to, and that gives hope that we've got to remember that Australians are decent, fair-minded people, and they want to see the right thing done. I mean, peace in this country will happen when that gets there. In terms of reconciliation, it's been on a long road. It's been the first decade, which ended in 2000 with the bridge walks, where Howard said no, but they've kept going as well. We're 23 years later. Some progress has been made, but I really think the voice will give a structural reform which will give great effect to reconciliation. We'll finally admit what the problems are in the country. No one wants to call the country racist, but we have a tendency to be racist. I have a personal view. I think everyone's a racist. If anyone who says they don't have a bias or a view or about someone else is wrong. But as soon as you let your bias and your view perpetuate itself in how you treat or think about and act about others, then yeah, you are. But most people are not. They're decent, fair-minded people who handle their own prejudice. Prejudice is a normal part of society. But if you listen to a politician, it doesn't exist. Because you've got to remember, our Attorney General told us we all got the right to be a bigot. Not an effective leader, I didn't think. But anyway, he's not there anymore. But in terms of the questions here, I think reconciliation can make great bounds with this new effective one. And the other point here, someone asked in the chat again about the 10 Indigenous parliamentarians that are in the Parliament this term. A great achievement. I hope one I think that's built on. But they're restricted in their power. They must speak for their party. They must speak for the issues. We won't be going out attacking what they're doing. They're all trying to do the best job they can in the circumstances and the positions they're in. A great achievement to get there. We should celebrate it. Same as we should celebrate all our thinkers, all our intellects, all of our policy wonks. We have some other reforms. We have the Coalition of Peaks. We have closed the gap. They're there at the moment, but they're advising government with a voice. They would advise their own people to help us to get these programs through. That'll be the turn and the change. Because we have our own very, very smart people out there doing it. But the moment they're restricted, and part of the voice is actually giving our voice to that process as well. And some of those people made a great issue. Someone made one point in there about the bushfires. There's a Royal Commission to bushfires. Every one of them has recommended cultural burning as a key factor, and it's moving ahead about how we manage land in this country. Every time they say, yeah, great idea, 3 months later, forgotten. The same as every Royal Commission does. I mean, a Royal Commission is an admission that the government has now got to a point of catastrophic public administration failure. So we have a Royal Commission where no one talks about it for 5 years because others talk about it. Then we do it again. But someone needs to be in there to give effect to those truth tellings. That's what a Royal Commission does. We have so many of them. And part of the Voices idea here is to actually give effect to those. Sorry, I don't want to hog the mic. I'm trying to answer those questions.
Yeah, good on you, Jeff.
Thanks, Jeff. Anyone else like to make a comment? Uncle Ray?
In terms of reconciliation, there was only 2 countries on the planet who had a plan for reconciliation. One was South Africa, and they went through the whole process. They had certain criteria of how they would achieve that reconciliatory process. I think they finished their job about 3 or 4 years ago now, before COVID. But Australia is the only other country that has a framework for reconciliation. It has those 4 ways of dealing with it. And the only people, the major people who are taking that on really is the business community, because they're very serious about trying to get people in there, our people in there, and learn about cultural diversity and a whole range of other things so that they can do better business in community and in our nation. And so that particular process you won't find anywhere else on the planet. We should be patting ourselves on the back and supporting the Reconciliation Council's achievements, even though I personally might have some grievances and some issues with the reconciliation process. I need to push those aside for the greater good and for all of us to work together towards a much more better way of dealing with things. And I'm hoping that people here on this panel here will look at the reconciliation process and those 4 frameworks that the Reconciliation Council has developed and put them into practice. Because reconciliation isn't a destination, it's a journey. We're not going to arrive at a destination and saying, wow, look at us. It's a journey, and it's going to take a long, long time for us to get to get to some of those milestones that we want to achieve. Maybe that's a better way of saying it, instead of looking at it as a destination, just a few milestones along the road. And one of those milestones would be, let's get this referendum up and running, and let's get this vote, get 100% of our people behind it to give us a voice in Parliament.
Jim, you know, when I think about it, how far we've come. We've broken that cement way back there. It's all crumbled up, and we raised up, and we're walking right back from there. We're up front here. And when you think about it, right now, in our First Nation people here, you just think of all the positions and the companies and what our people have successfully achieved everything now. We got our doctors, we've got our principals in schools, got our to repeat that again, doctors in the hospitals, you know, in all these mainstreams, our Aboriginal people are raising up to all, they have their own businesses. Tribal Warrior have their own boat business. When you think about it, our people today now, look at our actors, our movie stars, our, you know, everything. Our kids are leaving, going right through the year 12 and going straight through the university. Look at our greatest kids now. You know, look, I got a grandson just come back from Italy. He was known as, his name is getting really well here, Dennis Golding. He just come back from Italy. He traveled over there because he's an artist, great artist. And look, we have our artists with their own art galleries, everything. When you think about it, what our people has achieved today. So if we can all get together, and each one that's successfully achieved of what they're doing today, put them all together and broadly acknowledge them, have them recognized openly in this country, how great now that our Indigenous people, our First Nation people have come, and how great they are now with all what they're doing in their successful things now. There's a lot. When you think about when the government first gave the money to, what's that you just mentioned not so long ago, ATSIC. I always thought to myself that, okay, they spilt the money out, having in their minds from Parliament House and saying, okay, give these Black people what they need. We're giving them money and see what they could do. When it fell through, they wanted it to fall through because they were set up. They set the Black people up to fail. So when that failed, they gave up, you know, they laughed. I reckon they laughed behind doors and said, see, you give these black people money. What did they do with it? What's happening? Where is it? What did they do with it? And then they have that, they can have that held against our First Nation people for years, saying we won't achieve to anything. So that's what I'm speaking about. When you think about our people of today, you know, with these wonderful, successful things they've done now, they're doing now. Let us come together, our reconciliation people come together and broaden and open up the recognition of our people that achieved successfully. And you'll be surprised how many of our First Nation people has achieved. And let the government know that.
Thank you. Could I say something further from Auntie Ali? I think she's reminded us I think you've reminded us so very carefully about one thing we tend to neglect. That is the progress.
Recording in progress.
If we look over, we look over our shoulders how much success there's been. There's been massive success because we keep getting blinded by how much there is still to be done. I think those reminders us about that there has been progress and there's been many achievements. We have to acknowledge and celebrate that as well.
Yeah.
In doing that, and in 3 days, I'll help celebrate my mother's life. Sorry. She made many achievements in her life, and I helped celebrate them in 3 days. She devoted her life to making the life of her children better, and she succeeded.
She did.
I mean, my job is to make sure I do the same for my children. And that's one of the measures that I take from that.
Thanks,
So
Jeff. You, your mother. Well, she's a warrior.
Progress.
On that too, just remind us too. I always remind myself nearly every day that it's only 55 years since the last referendum, and we didn't have a voice. I mean, we're still under terra nullius, and so in 55 years we've made huge big inroads, like Andy's saying there. I mean, this is extraordinary. What other nation group can boast the things that we've achieved? And look at the 1982 Education Act. It's possibly produced what it has produced, the most important educated blackfellows in the country now. We need to celebrate that and help to give them a lot more stronger voice.
Yes.
And
yes.
the other statement was one about love.
Yeah.
It was about saying we're one people. We're not going anywhere. Our fates are bound to each other. And we should go forward on the basis that we love each other, and that's the way we proceed. Someone just mentioned about the country itself. I mean, the reason I think that we're such a comfortable country, we've never had a trauma as a nation. They bombed Darwin once, but they wouldn't tell us about it. But every other country has had the need for a Bill of Rights. There's a need to draw a line in the sand where the government can't cross because they've had civil wars, invasions, the rest of it. We're such a lucky country in some respects, because we ignore their internal wars.
And we do.
In terms of the referendum itself, there's been 155 attempts to have a referendum. Only 44 of those attempts have made it past the parliament. So the parliament's talked about 155 and said, "Oh, we'll let the people make a decision on 44 of them." And of the 44, only 8 got through. We hope the 156 and the 45th one to get through will be the 9th one.
Yeah,
that's our focus.
Yeah.
There was one other point which people made about formal and substantive equality. And that's a real question people still grapple with. People who want formal equality want everyone to be treated equally. Now that assumes everyone's equal. The only result from that will be inequality, entrenched. You must have substantive equality, which is treating people unequally to make the outcome equal. And that's what a few of our politicians don't get, especially about those of the H factor. I won't talk any more about it. Now, the other one was about ATSIC itself. I often challenge people when they talk about ATSIC. Tell me someone who was convicted of an offence. No one can, because no one was. It was a folly of the Howard government to attack it. I'm writing a paper now, and another person actually in the chat said, we need a history. We do need a history. It's time it was told. Because some of the lies that were peddled around that time were political. But we've got to move on from that and focus on the future. And the last point I made is Margaret Hetherington actually made a point about examples of what policies would be changed. I do have slides on this, but I don't have it here. I mean, one of the biggest issues that people talk about now is that we need a specific synopsis and appraisal of all the domestic violence situations in remote and transitional communities and have actually plans to address them. We need to look at the NT intervention in full, look at the positives and the many negatives, and come back with a process to do it, not just plow on with something that's most of us not working. We need to work on the CDP program, which is not working. The Cascade intervention, outback stores, remote food security, the debacle of the IAS program. We've got to review the cultural heritage protection and management legislation, which is just resulting in sites being destroyed at carte blanche across the country. And the safety of our communities. And Des made the point about the regional councils. I recently reviewed the plans of all the regional councils of ATSIC in 2004-2005. In 70% of every council's plan, the top priority was domestic violence and safety in the community.
Hasn't changed.
Hasn't changed. Well, the government's not addressing it, but it hasn't changed. I mean, you've got to remember what ATSIC's funding was. 85% of all ATSIC money was quarantined to CDP and the housing infrastructure. And the 15% was left over to fund a myriad of other programs, all the women's programs, all the safety programs, all the children's health, everything. And then when Howard got to power, there was only, I think it was 400 million in those programs, and he cut it by 320. So all of the camp programs, all the women's programs, all the child support programs, all the safety programs disappeared overnight. And that's it, was blamed for everything, despite the fact we didn't have health because that was taken away. And when you sit on, and Des would know this quite definitely, sitting on a regional council, you'll get between 300 and 500 applications a year, knowing full well you can only fund 30 of them.
Yeah.
Every year we had a couple of hundred people who are violently disappointed, and they take it out on the regional council because they're there and they care.
Yeah.
Now that's part of the task we have in front of us because we care.
Yeah.
We wouldn't be doing this if we didn't care about the next generation, the kids that are coming up now in a better future. But it's only Elliot has reminded us so eloquently, I think, we have come a long way. We have a lot to be also proud about. Thank you.
I think, Jeff, partly what you're speaking to there is the answer to the question of why do we need the voice in the Constitution, and not why should it just be in legislation or another representative body. Why does it have to be enshrined in the Constitution? And everything you've been speaking about really is the answer as to why. Because ATSIC, for example, when you defund something, when you find your way to shut it down, right? Once the voice is in the Constitution, a new government can't shut the voice down.
I think I agree that.
Yeah,
when the Constitution is successful, the real hard work then starts of how we design a voice and resource it and structure it to make it truly effective.
Yeah.
And accountable.
Right. And I think that comes
to do
sorry,
as a people.
I think that comes back to Michelle's question. So is reconciliation an endless process? And that if we can take that to the voice, it's a process, and you're absolutely right. Once the voice is there, and the Makarrata Commission is established, it's an ongoing process. It's not going to just stop there. But the voice can help inform and guide treaty. The voice can help inform and guide formalized truth telling. So it has real power and impact. And I love what you've said, Michelle. You've asked us, can we imagine a reconciled Australia? And imagination like that, that's a real tool. That's a tool for change. So reimagining and imagining something that is, better than what the current status quo is how you can move towards that imagined future. So it's a really, really good question. And the only other thing I wanted to add in, a lot of people now are talking about conciliation and not reconciliation, because they say that to reconcile, that comes from two parties having been together in the first place, having had a, dispute, a struggle, and reconciling. So in the sense of Indigenous and non-Indigenous reconciling, people were saying, well, it needs a conciliation process. And I think that comes back to the heart of what's going on for the voice, which is justice. It is finding justice. I think for me, reconciliation comes very much so when you look deep inside yourself. And there are parts of yourself fighting with each other. And if you read that Uluru Statement and you understand the spiritual depths of it, you'll begin to reconcile things within yourself. And then you'll find a clearer truth to speak up for what everybody on this panel is asking us to do.
So thanks very much for that, Marg. Thanks, Jeff. I'm sorry I dropped out for a while. I'm on my mobile phone now.
Can I just make
It
two other
took me a
quotes
while
at the
to-
moment?
Yep. Yeah, go on, Jeff.
I just made some points before about what we'll be doing in the next few days. I'm going through some sorry business, but I got a call from a man who gives me great support and great sort of mentorship. And the two things he said to me about, he said, we're a product of our history, a product of my experience, but I won't let it define me, and neither should you. His last point he said to me was, he says, those who drink from the well should never forget who dug it. So that's about acknowledging those of the past.
Yeah.
I keep getting amazed by other people who have such eloquent grasp of how to actually portray difficult and imprecise process. It's an amazing capacity and ability.
Yeah.
And we have those people in amongst our ranks every day.
Yeah. And we just need to also emphasize the fact that, you know, the voice may not help us to get our young fellows out of jail, stop all of our kids from being taken. But that's our voice. That's the voice of our children. That's the voice of our mothers and our fathers and our community to say enough is enough. And if the constitutional voice hears that, it might make a difference at the grassroots level, because it's not making a difference now. We've got more children taken now than before the Aboriginal Protection Acts were in place. So yeah, as well as too many kids in jail. You can't jail 10-year-olds. It's just criminal. So we've got a lot of work to be done, and including what we're doing now in terms of this voice.
Going back to Margaret's point, the great majority of our programs now are interventions. They're not development. They don't build people's capacity to take charge of their lives and take charge of their community's lives. They're interventions which force us down a track. I mean, it's got to be both. You've got to have an intervention to address the symptom. We must have development to address the cause. And that's how our program should be designed, and people should be at the centre. That is not how we do it today. Unless it's overseas. We can have development overseas, but not in Australia, because we're not third world, are we? Sort of.
I reckon.
I was being flippant, sorry.
Oh, sorry. I reckon 30 to 40 male, female elders go to Parliament House and we do a big smoking inside and outside. Do that cleansing. They need that cleansing to get rid of that negative high superiority spirit of them. They get rid of that. That's what I believe. But I know it won't happen. But that's what I think would be a good thing. But it wouldn't happen. I know it wouldn't happen. They wouldn't let us in the door. But that's me thinking. Well, our elders need to take a part in it as well. Where we were back there and how far we've come from back there to now. And then think of our younger generation. Speak out, voice ourselves about what are you going to do about our young people our young generation. These are our speakers. These are our voices of tomorrow.
Mm.
We've got a couple more questions, Des, if you'd like to take one of them.
Yeah, most certainly.
This question is from Janice Blakeney. She asked, I'm concerned that in this still racist country being fed lies by the Murdoch media, there will be a concentrated fear campaign making out that the First Nations people are looking to grab power, and this is the first move. How important do you think it will be for the true reason to be made clear before any referendum is held?
Look, my view is I think we just got to be positive all the time and not get sucked into, you know, the debate between the yes and the no sayers, so to speak. You know, we've got, as Jeff has pointed out, there's some very smart, articulate, qualified, experienced Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander people now in Parliament and in positions of power. So we just need to let them get on with it and ignore. That's the best way, is ignore the no sayers, so to speak. And yeah, we all know about Murdoch and what they've been doing for years. But, you know, we just got to get on with it.
Yeah. If I could, sorry.
Yes, certainly,
If I'm
Jeff.
talking too much, tell me to just.
No.
I do this every day. I'm just passionate about it. That's why I do it. We've done analysis of the Murdoch press and every press unit about their percentage. The Murdoch press are running at 90% negative. We went back to them and pointed it out to them, and they listened. So you've got to appeal. There is goodness in people, and if you appeal them and show it what's right and wrong, there's a chance. And that's the approach we're taking for it. I prefer not to think of things of left wing and right wing. I think it's very helpful. There's only right and wrong, and people should be on the right side of history, not the wrong side. And when you point that out to people, and it's not about attacking them, it's showing them.
Yeah.
And that's where we can get angry about this, but we go back to the statement, which is about love and compassion, and we're here together. And Auntie Pat Anderson, who leads our program, and Megan Davis, that's they're my bosses. Yeah. Well, it's why our program is full of love and compassion and focus. They're led by women. Yeah. I get too carried away. They've got to tell me to stop. So, and remind me, the statement was about love. It was about coming together. It was about walking together for a better future.
Yeah.
And they remind us every day about that. They said, you don't lose. He said, stay true to Uluru. Don't lose. Stay on track. Stay the course. Don't let them defer you.
Yep.
They're very strong women who do a great job keeping us on track. And there are many strong women who do that in our communities.
There is a clear fear mongering already beginning.
Oh.
We've seen it. You've all seen it, and we're being told now that there's going to be a lot of money put behind this fear mongering. So I think the question there from Marlene is really an important question. You know, and I agree with you. You know, Jeff. I know what's happening with non-Indigenous people like myself and initiatives of change. When we are hearing this kind of conversations, I think, and I would appeal to everyone on this call, do your due diligence, do the research, find out what is true, what isn't. It's not that hard, actually. You've just got to, and you've got to do the research yourself and find those sources that you trust. And now that you're sitting on a call with Jeff Scott and Ray Minnicon and Auntie Ali, these are people that you can call upon, to find out and to sort out, the muck on the mire and get to the truth. I think it's really, really important. And I think, again, I'm going to keep saying it, there's 70 people on this call. It's up to you to take the information out there. And when you do hear the fear mongering happening, then, speak to what you've heard and what you've learned. Be prepared to speak up. Some of it's not fear mongering. Some of it's just plain misinformation. and misunderstanding. And I think, again, we've got to be on top of it to sort of speak, to speak for the voice. Yeah.
You have to correct, not admonish. As soon as you admonish someone, they become your enemy.
Yeah.
If you correct them, they can become your friend.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But the press just thrives on division and scandal, because that's what the public like to hear about. That's what sells papers. Now you have to deal with that as a human nature.
Yeah.
But there are ways around it. We have to keep focused. Thank you.
Yeah. You're on mute there, Des.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, I'm on my phone as well. No, I think a good example of that was the Prime Minister when he was asked the question about a republic, and he said no. That was his bottom line. He said no. I didn't make any commitment to that. I've made a commitment to the referendum, and he's sticking by it. So, you just need to bat it away with the truth, as being said.
We have another question here. Des, if you'd like to take another question now.
Yeah, sure.
This is how many from Mike Goodman. Thank you, Mike. How many Indigenous are members of the how many Indigenous are members of the Parliament, both at the federal and the state level?
Well, at the federal level, there's 10. State level, I'm not too sure. It's one of those things about Google it.
Yeah, that's probably the same again.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, probably. Yeah. We've got a number of Indigenous Aboriginal people in the territory in Parliament, and have had for some time. Yeah. So I don't know. That probably doesn't answer it. I'm sorry, but I can research that if you like.
I've got a list of most of them. I can pull that together. So,
Oh, okay, that'd be great. Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah. That's I'm a bit anal. That's what I do.
No, it's important stuff. So if that person requesting it can leave their email address or something like that.
Yeah, I can just send it back before them. And the very fact there are 70 people who've given up Saturday afternoon to be on this call is heartening.
Yes, absolutely.
Yep. You know how much how important that is.
Yep.
Des, that's all the questions we have here that have been sent through from Mandy, but there may be other questions that people still want to ask you. So I'll hand it back to you again, Des.
Can I just say something, Des? We just
Certainly.
need to remember that it's just not Aboriginal people here. We've got Torres Strait Islanders as well. And the Torres Strait Islander community, even though not represented here as clearly as they should, they do have a voice too, and they need to be included in this. They do have a statement from the Deep that they've come up with, and to add to their voice into this voice as well. So that needs to be taken into consideration, because they're always missed out in a whole range of things. And they do have the Torres Strait Islander Regional Council to help to give them that voice. But sometimes we don't listen to that voice as clearly as we should.
Yep. No worries. Agree. Nancy, can I just go back to you? Are there any other questions from anyone?
Question from Ian has just popped up. However, it might be leaning into a bit of the negativity that we want to avoid. It asks, how do we answer the claim that a voice will create a form of apartheid in Australia?
That's easy. It's already is apartheid. What's new?
Apartheid is about having a negative policy against the people based on race. This is not a negative. This is a positive. This is about correction. This is about going forward as one.
Yep.
That's it. Good on you, Jeff.
And if you actually the old laws, so to speak, particularly in Queensland, they were copied by South Africa for apartheid.
Yes.
People don't know that.
Mm.
It's absolutely appalling. So, you know, the truth telling that people are talking about, the truth of the colonisation in this country, people just don't know about. People just want to switch off. But it's not an argument that we want to have with people. We just want the truth, them to know the truth.
Yeah.
Of colonisation country, of our country.
Yeah.
I think Ian's asking, well, what Ian's doing for us is sort of putting forward just one of the many, many questions that are being asked. And he's looking for a way, you know, to help him answer people sort of out there who are asking these, you know, I mean, that in itself is really a kind of a crazy question.
Well,
But
I'm sorry if I seem flippant there, but these questions are very important because
that's, yeah.
everything you say on here, I have noted it, and it informs us that to have the responses and have the responses in our positions ready.
Exactly.
These are going to come and people we're a democracy. People can have an opinion. They can state their view.
Yep.
It's about being informed.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And we need to be helping people, you know, have these answers at the ready. And I think, Ian, you know, the more we all learn about what the voice actually is, the more you would be able to answer somebody like that, because it is sort of the opposite of apartheid. It really doesn't make sense to say that. There's an extremely good article, and I know there's many, written by Thomas Mayer in the Australian National Geographic, and I can put that link in the chat. So anything like that really, really would help you answer other people. We've also got a recording by Uncle Glenn Lockery, who's just also done an unpacking of the Uluru Statement from the Heart, or he calls it the Statement from the Heart signed in Uluru. And again, so looking for resources like that so we can direct people, and I'm sure the panel could direct people to where to become more informed. Yeah.
Thank you. Could we get a copy of Uncle Glenn stuff? I haven't
Sorry?
seen it.
Oh, there's the link there.
That's
Oh,
the link to the Australian, that's the article that
Well,
Thomas
I
Mayer
read Thomas's article. I just haven't
Yeah,
seen it.
Yeah. Now the Uncle Glenn one, I'll get to the Raising
That
Peace
sounds interesting.
organisers
I
and
like his terminology about the statement from the heart signed Uluru is about a better way of describing issues.
Mm,
One thing we don't want to do is put a lot of pressure on one group of people. Open their hearts up to have that issue.
mm,
And one of the things, just as an anecdote to come back with, when we had the statement read out at Uluru and went out to the community at Mutijulu, we're going on, the elders at Mutijulu came out and gave us 3 items. They gave us a shield, a pity, to carry the statement in. They gave us a shield to defend ourselves against the criticism and the fight you're going to have. And they gave us a fighting stick not to give up. Again, the elders come back with such succinct and sustained responses to issues. It continues to amaze me.
Good.
There's a pin out on that now. We're about to release a pin where people can show their support by wearing a pin. And it is a pin designed with those 3 items in it and designed by Alison Page, which will be available for people.
mm.
Mm.
Okay, sorry, some more questions.
I see there was a question in there in the chat about the lady from Alice Springs that's been elected to Parliament. Jacinta. Yeah, I know Jacinta. I know her family. I know her mum and her father, an Irishman. But I'm not going to make any negative comments about Jacinta because that hurts from what we're trying to do here. We should celebrate those 10 people that are in federal government today, and they want to have a voice about, you know, whatever it might be.
It's there.
Yeah.
It's starting to become political, but I think with Jacinta, she is very frustrated by the position that people still find themselves in, and we share that frustration.
Yeah.
What we have to do is help find a solution.
Yeah.
Actually show that the voice can, because the process in the past have not.
Mm.
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 Yep.
I'm going to turn my mic off because I'm talking too much and I get carried away. Sorry.
There's also a question from Joyce asking about if the king and the new monarch would support the voice to parliament.
Well, maybe our Prime Minister, who's currently over there with 10 people, might raise that question with King Charles.
Yeah.
I hadn't turned their mind to that one.
I think there's one frame of thought, or there's been a number of comments that the new king actually wants to come to Australia, which will be a great thing for all Australians. And there's been negative comments, about the Queen, and I've read all those as well. I mean, she was the Queen of the Commonwealth, and we're part of the Commonwealth. So, it's part of our story.
Well, I met the Queen Elizabeth II twice. And I told her about the reconciliation and things like that, and telling about the ignorance of Parliament people. I think they're afraid of the truth. That's why they're not interested in wanting to know anything, hear the voices of First Nation people, because they're afraid. And, and I spoke to Nelson Mandela about it too. He cried. He said, I know what you're going through. We prayed about it. It's the last time I seen him. I met Prince Williams on the block in Redfern. And he said the same thing, They must be afraid.
Yeah.
They must be afraid to admit that we can look after ourselves, that we know all our needs and how to use our needs. They know that we know how to look after ourselves, but they won't admit it. They just want to be staying there as liars, not knowing the truth.
I have some views about it. I don't think a monarchy can admit to the fact that they're the perpetrators of colonialism.
No.
Colonialism was a process where peoples and nations and lands were subjugated for the economic progress of those in power. That continues today. I just hope we hit a tipping point someday where a government finally admits its job is not to support the wealthy. Its job is to make the country have more certainty, redistribute the wealth, and have a sustainable people where people care about each other and not fear each other.
Yeah.
That's what a Prime Minister should do.
That's what we can do too.
Yes.
Des, we have another question here, if we're ready for that.
Yes.
Tanya asks, do you think we'll have another walk across the Harbour Bridge leading up to the referendum? So certainly something a lot of us have talked about.
Well, if you can organise it, I'll walk with you.
See how it goes. See if it continues and not fade. That faded.
Yeah, look, Auntie's 80 years old now, so you better hurry up and do that.
Yeah.
What about the
I'll be
bridge
still
walk?
around in the spirit, and I'll be very noisy in the spirit when I go to my dream time.
Well, I want to walk with you across that bridge there, Auntie, so let's make it happen.
I think the bridge walks are the culmination of an enormous amount of goodwill and spirit in the country. One which the Prime Minister at the time ignored to his detriment. And he will be condemned forever for that. But that's not for us. History will do that. But the bridge walks were a massive demonstration of support and goodwill.
Yeah.
And similar things. We hadn't talked about how we're going to do that, but it's a very good suggestion.
Yeah, it is.
It did capture the imaginations of the country.
It did.
Yes, it did.
Of what was possible.
That's that same end what I was talking about.
Say it loudly. Say it to me.
Yeah. No, I was just saying to the ladies here, I'd like to see that in the next bridge walk, because the first one did fade. It faded. This the lucky one. I'd like to see it happen. The next bridge
Yeah.
walk.
Just make it
Well, they
bridge
put me in
across-
front there. I was in front in a little golf trolley.
You were with us on the bridge.
Sorry.
Ah, good.
Now,
Well,
I'd see how that goes, because when I spoke about the 60s, and then in the middle of the 60s to 2022, we went downhill, but we've got to get up and use that energy again
Yeah.
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 and walk forward.
I'm just noticing the questions. There's one there about will the voice help men violence and addiction? That's got to be a primary focus of the voice. The very fabric of our families in this country has been torn apart.
Right.
And that's why we have so much,
Right.
I think, so much violence and addiction. We have to start mending that. That's the true job of leaders.
Yeah.
Again, that will be a real focus of it. You must do that.
Yeah.
The only one which I was looked at is the clothing optional march. Well, I'll leave that to others to have a discussion about.
Yeah.
If
But,
interested.
you know, the assumption is that we're not doing anything. We're doing as much as we can to actually stop the violence in our communities.
Yes.
We're also trying to stop our young men from going into jails. We're doing everything we can, and those organisations that need to be supported and funded to do that are not getting the funding necessary to make sure that doesn't happen. So it's, you know, the voice is going to help us in some ways, but we're already doing all this stuff.
And
Won't stop.
we'll have a greater headspace to have these discussions. At the moment, they don't exist. There's not the forum to have the discussions and have the debates about developing what the ideas are.
No.
I mean, the only bad idea is one you don't put up. That's how I see it. And on this one, we've got to start to have that headspace, and that's what the voice will provide you. When I look at the great people going into jail, it's disgraceful. And the kids are taken to repair. It's
Yeah.
indefensible. But it's still happening.
Des, if I may jump in here, Mansi is just reminding us of the time and wondering if you want to start to close the pull together the panel so we can move into the closing comments. So back to you, Des.
Yeah, most. Well, I
Thank you.
to close today's proceedings is to just get a final comment from each of the panel members. If you're comfortable with, I mean, you don't have to make a comment, but I think that'd be, you know, I found it really valuable, but I won't talk now. I'll look at the end. So, Auntie Ali, do you want to say anything in the closing comments? Sorry to put you on the spot.
No, I'm just heard about that bridge walking again. Well, that's still in my mind now, and just sort of wiping out everything else in my mind. But no, we'll stick together, come together, and still talk, you know, and hear one another's voices, and learn from one another's voices, and encourage one another's voices. You know, we'll all come together as that one voice.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
Uncle Ray?
Yeah, I just reminding myself that 56 years ago, a conversation like this would have been illegal in Queensland because of the Aboriginal Protection Act.
Yeah.
So 55 years later, we can start talking to each other, and we just got to keep on talking to each other. I mean, this is a new for many Aboriginal people who've lived on the other side of 67 on those missions and stuff, and many of them still do. So this is a new conversation for them, and they need to be brought along this journey as well, because they're a bit confused, and they need to understand what this process is about. And if any of you here got the means to do that, to get out and into your own communities too, and just spread the word and help them to understand that this is a really, really important thing. And like we mentioned, like I said before, the ratio is 97-3. 97-3. That's huge, huge odds. And so we need to do a lot of work to make sure that 97% goes up 100%.
And you know, Ray, I always thought about my youth, because I worked in Cleveland Street High School, year 11 and 12. I think they should be with their period 40 40 minutes period of their original studies, the unit in their classrooms, I think that should be all about politics, because our young people, the year 11 and 12, before they leave school, educate them, educate our First Nation kids, youth, and let them understand what it's all about, and having them to think about it, it's going to help, and there's going to be more voices. And I not only listening to the teacher on Aboriginal studies, but have a live physical resource person walking in there, political person that's walking in there and explaining and educating these kids. That's what I feel like, because I've worked with a lot of youth kids. But politics they got to be educated in, our kids. Yeah.
Yeah, I just
So
wanted
they'll
to-
understand, and then maybe that's a big breakthrough with our youth coming together and voicing themselves.
Yeah, I just wanted to make one more comment. Why stop at, marching across the Harbour Bridge? We should be marching across every bridge in every capital city.
What, internationally, you mean?
No, national.
Eh?
We can make it internationally if you want, huh?
Internationally as well.
As far as the visual step.
Yes. I think we got to be a bit cheeky and bold,
Oh, that's right. Cheeky and bold.
Yeah, but still have that wisdom with you,
I'll go to Margaret. Margaret, would you?
Yeah, sure. Look, it's been really an interesting afternoon, and a lot said. On that note of walking across every bridge in every major city, what we're talking about is action, mindful action, but it's also symbolisms of hope. This is so important, because this is about the human psyche. And while we leave people in negative overwhelm, they tend to just give up in despair. So if we can shift people to hope and stay on this sort of very solution-focused path, and I do believe that the voice in the Constitution is part of that, that hope, right, for a new Australia, for changes in Australia. I just want to remind everybody that our current Constitution does not recognise Indigenous people. My 90-year-old mother puts it so well. She says to me, it doesn't make sense. First peoples who lived here are not in the Constitution of this country.
How dare they do that? How dare they do that?
Auntie, we are in
Foreigners.
Article 128.
Convicts.
Yeah.
If you go to Article 128, you'll see us there, but we're terra nullius. It's blanked out.
Not good enough.
Thank you very much, Margaret. We'll go to Jeff.
I just think the opportunity to be involved in a headspace where people have taken the opportunity to provide so much input and demonstrate how great Australian people can be. But also coming back with the ideas and the questions which will help us take this forward. I said, we need to hear all the ideas, constructive ones about what we're missing, because often when you're involved in this space, we miss them.
Yep.
And the only thing we have to know about a campaign is when you think you sold a message, start again.
Yeah, that's right.
That's how we sustain a campaign. And start again and believe. Stay true.
Okay, so look, I'd really like a heartfelt thanks to all of the panel members and to all of the participants. We had 70 there at one stage, which is fantastic. So, hopefully people have got some value out of the last 2 hours on a Saturday afternoon. And yeah, all I can say is thank you very much. I'm really humbled, as I said right at the start, to be a moderator for this.
Go the Swans, go the Rabbitohs.
What do you think?
Agree with both.
No, the Roosters.
Sorry, that's next year.
I love the Koori lads in the Rabbitohs.
Okay,
One
so
is Biripi. He's my boy from up home.
I've just got one little piece of housekeeping to do, and for Raising Peace, just to say what I think is quite redundant and unnecessary, in that there are lots of other conversations in the program, and I'd encourage people. The one thing that's on tonight is a discussion on the quite an amazing doco called The Mothers of the Revolution, about the women from Greenham Common, whom Mikhail Gorbachev said was the real reason why he signed the anti-nuclear treaty with Reagan. It wasn't that he trusted Reagan; he trusted the women of Greenham Common. So it's quite a powerful movie. Look, we have just a small film to go out on. It's called Together as One, on the remote and Indigenous community Ali Karung, formerly known as Warrabri. This community is located south of Tennant Creek and north of Alice Springs in the Northern Territory. The film brings back memories for former residents of happy times of living in community. At a deeper level, First Nations communities like Ali Karung hope to gain benefits from having the representation of a voice enshrined in the Constitution. This, it is sorely hoped, will lead to better health outcomes, alleviate poverty, improve housing, employment, better education, and the list goes on.
Peter, I'm just wondering, just before you play that video, which is our closing, if I could say a couple of words of thanks to echo what's already been said. First of all, I'd like to say a very warm thank you to Raising Peace for continuing this program, and particularly for making sure that the First Nations yarning is front and centre of each of these series that they hold every year. Many of us were privileged to be a part of the series last year and the First Nations Day, and again today. So we do thank Raising Peace as one of those many, many networks that have been mentioned here today across Australia. And if I may just mention one thing, we do have something that's called a Voice from the Heart Alliance. And it has been, been going about a year now. We have a brand new logo, which we're itching to get out to everybody. But if you want to join forces with other people who are struggling with some of these questions, to answer these questions, to talk to people and to support each other, it's one way that your network or individuals across Australia, it's a national network, can participate and amplify the voice of our First Nations brothers and sisters. So thank you to everybody again from a collaborative effort. Sorry?
It's called the Heart of the Alliance?
No, it's called the Voice from the Heart Alliance. One of us can put a link in the chat to where to get a hold of it. Thank you, Peter.
Right. Good. Okay. And one thing I was going to say with the thank yous was I wanted to say a big thank you to Robin Hutchinson, because James and I were struggling with trying to network people, and then Robin arrived and that solved a very big problem. So a real big, substantial
Not at all.
reason.
It's all about the relationships that we all build with each other, and it's all about the walking together and whatever that looks like. And this is what we've demonstrated today. But thank you, Peter. It's
that's all right.
Very collaborative effort.
Well, I know that James and I are very grateful. Okay. Mansi, do you think we could lead into that film?
Yes, I'm going to start playing it now. It'll play to the end of the session. Thanks everyone for joining us.
Thank you, Mansi.
Thank you, everyone.
Memories of peaceful time, singing stories and songline. Alice was the key, taught us how to live properly. Culture taught us how to live life. That's the way it should be. Living in this community. Thinking about those hateful times, listening, not taking sides, looking for the culture sign to be the best we can, guided by our elders by our side. That's the way it should be, living in this community. Back in the day, we were living together, all tribe, all gifted, sharing all of the culture songs, keeping stories alive, keeping old ways strong.
It's time for us to take knowledge back from the waking up times, the elders way back. Keep teaching the next generation to live, how to heal and how to forgive.
Dreaming about future days, looking forward, finding ways for us to live as one. Here together in Ellie Krung, make the best for our next generation. That's the way we should be.